Then there are, of course, the great chests that were made for these rooms. This is our own Trebizond cassone, which shows some kind of scene between the some kind of battle with the Ottomans that takes place on the Anatolian Peninsula. There's Constantinople and Trebizond shown at the same time, leaving us with a lot of confusion because those two places are in fact hundreds of miles apart. And this great chest was thought to come from the Strozzi family and maybe from the Strozzi Palace in Florence. And here you can see their falcon on the sides. We've done a great deal of new technical research of this cassone with the help of Mecca Baumeister, Sylvia Centeno, and Pascal Patrice, and we're going to continue. You'll hear more about this in the future. It's a very complicated work of art. Then we get to a beautiful room, I have to say, of works devoted to the arts of childbirth. And there we have both these birth trays. The first one I showed you was that made for Lorenzo de' Medici. The one on the left here, which is a sort of transitional kind of object between a tray and a bowl, by the great Florentine artist Jacopo Pontormo. And also a number of paintings that show babies. These start in the 15th century and then gather speed in the 16th century. And on the right, you see one from Bologna by the woman artist Lavinia Fontana. A lot of discussion amongst the organizing committee about whether this is a commemorative portrait of a child who is alive, or as in fact it's a posthumous portrait, and it could go either way. It's a very interesting and open question. Then we get into Linda's section. She's much more comfortable talking about it than I am, but I'll give it a stab. This is a plate, a very important piece of ceramics, 1536, which is called, for obvious reasons, the phallic plate. And so it's sort of like an Arcimboldo before the fact, in which the whole head is made up of these sort of writhing, intertwining phalluses. And the banderole, again, like the banderoles that we saw in those early objects that were made to celebrate marriages, here instead it's a commentary that reads this way. So there's something very secret about this, meant to be understood only by those who are in on the joke, really, which says, "I don't know why everyone calls me a dickhead." But I hope that you will all go and explore this section on your own. But I want to leave you with the ideas that are at the core of it, which is that erotic art was not a peripheral theme in the Renaissance, but in fact was taken on by some of the greatest artists who were working at the time. Giulio Romano, Perino del Vaga, Parmigianino, and maybe you will notice that many of these artists are linked through their association with Raphael's workshop in around 1520. There seems to be something about that particular cultural moment in Rome which was inspirational to these artists. And Linda thinks, and I'm sure she's absolutely right, that there's something about the wit and the satire and the subversive quality of these works of art that tie it to this Roman culture that then gets diffused throughout Italy. And then finally, in the last room, we arrive at the grand paintings of love and marriage, most of them Venetian, and they include such masterpieces as Giorgione's Laura. And I'll just remind you of what we know about this painting, which is that it was done by Giorgione, the great groundbreaking artist of the early 16th century in Venice, that she's called Laura because of the laurel branches that surround her. The back is inscribed with the date 1506, telling us that it was made for someone named Messer Giacomo, Mr. Giacomo. So in fact, for an early 16th century object, we know a good deal about this painting. Unfortunately, what we don't know is who she really is. And therefore, there's been a long scholarly debate about whether she is a courtesan, a mistress, a bride, or an ideal representation of one of these. And finally, I just wanted to show you that the last wall of the exhibition includes two magnificent paintings by Titian from later in his career, including this from the Prado of Venus and The Organist. This is a painting that is a variation of one in our own collection, Venus and the Lute Player. These were paintings that Titian seemed to have. He invented the theme and then he continued to vary it for different patrons. But this patron we know about. It was made for a man named Francesco Assonica, who was a good friend of the artists and an important lawyer in Venice. And he's included some details which to us make it seem that this is probably linked to this man's marriage or in some way commemorates his marriage. She's wearing a wedding ring, which you see quite clearly when you're in the galleries. This looks to be a portrait rather than just a generic or idealized figure, and many of the details in the background suggest a couple together behind this picture. So while these paintings by Titian are generally about the power of love and sight and music working together, a metaphor that still rings for us today. This specific picture may have been done with one very specific historical couple in mind. So thank you very much and enjoy the exhibition.